why I decided to make this work for this exhibition. When Michael Rolfe first approached me about taking part in the exhibition, and we were just talking about that time in the 70s and 80s when everyone was involved in everything and there was just no gap between your work and your life and your politics and things you did for money. It was all part of the same thing. And I was thinking back, oh, I've got all these Super 8s from that time. I must go and have a look at them and see if there's something there that might be appropriate to revisit for the idea of this exhibition. So I was involved in lots of artist spaces and artist-run initiatives, lots of activities. And when I trawled through all my stuff that was all buried away in a filing cabinet, I found, I sent it all off to Video 8 to get it converted to mini DV so I could actually see what was on them, and all these old Super 8s and some 16mm rolls. And when I had a look at the material, I mean, became really clear to me what I wanted to do, and that was to actually visit one day in 1982 that I think for me really summarised the spirit of that time for me and the spirit of my involvement and the collaborative relationships that we all had with other artists and with community at that time. And so I decided to make a work which revisited July the 10th, 1982, which was the launching of the Woolloomooloo mural project down in Woolloomooloo. And that, what you see in there, you've got two screens, and one of the screens I've taken some old 16mm footage that was being shot as part of a film by Beth McRae about murals being made at the time. There was a lot of that sort of artwork going on. Artists were very keen to engage in with community outside of galleries and museums and outside of the art market. And there was quite a lot of support from trade unions and funding bodies as well to allow these often artist-initiated projects to get off the ground. And so this film never got made. The footage that you see in there was shot by Erica Addis, and the sound was by Pat Fisk, both of whom are highly respected and distinguished filmmakers today. And so I took the old footage and I looked at it and I was thinking, well, what can I find in there that for me, you know, is going to really communicate something today of that time? And I found just by looking at those people who were there on the day that there was this amazing history for me of all of the social activism that was going on at the time. And, you know, it was an extraordinary mix of artists, trade unionists, community activists, local residents, arts administrators, the works. And they were all there on that day to celebrate not just the opening of the mural project, but the reclaiming of Woolloomooloo for public housing, and that was behind it all. The whole idea of the green bans, the struggles around Victoria Street, the struggles within the inner city to wrest back housing for people away from the developers, because Bob Askin, who was a really corrupt Premier of New South Wales during the 70s, he'd stitched up all these deals, basically sold off the inner city to developers, and the BLF and the FEDFA, who'd already gotten involved with green bans out at French's Forest. The residents approached them from Victoria Street and also Woolloomooloo, and then began that most remarkable period of history in Australia, the history of the green bans, and which our murals in part sought to commemorate, as well as the wider history of the waterfront, the history of immigration, which Woolloomooloo was the first port of call, and a very, very rich social history around working people in the inner city. And there were two parts to the project. There was the history component, which Michael Dolk and I worked on together over 3 years. We had a giant warehouse that the Housing Commission gave us for $2 a year in Woolloomooloo, and we worked there, and we also invited a range of other artists to work on a series of changing billboards, and they're all listed here in the program. This is a reproduction of the pamphlet that we had on the day, and it lists, you know, the huge number of people who were involved in different ways in the project. And we all worked out of that warehouse in Harmer Street. And, you know, as an artist, it was an incredibly satisfying period of time, but also just the nature of the collaborations and the understanding between all the parties to the collaboration about everyone's different roles. You know, nobody was trying to do what other people could do. Everyone had quite specific roles. And as artists, although we had to, in one sense, put our own sort of, if you like, artistic wishes to the side, we willingly did so in order to give best form and best expression to realising this history, this extraordinarily rich and important history.
I was asked to be in this show, I think primarily because I've been showing in Sydney for about 15 years, and Michael had heard that my CV read as like a list of defunct art spaces. So I've shown in like maybe like a lot of galleries, but like 16 of which have now closed down because of developers and that sort of thing. And you know, those things, it's part of time evolving, and you can't hold on to anything forever. And sometimes the galleries open just for a short time as part of their process. I myself have run a few spaces and some projects as well. But it's that categorically you meet hundreds and hundreds of people and art practitioners and different artists over the years, and part of what the notebooks are is sort of documenting those times. So well before I even went to art school, I was really, I loved taking notes and always travelled, and the pocket size notebook was a really pragmatic, portable, you know, it doesn't crush too much and you can really put it in your pocket. And I was obsessed with them even when I was a little girl. I remember stealing them from the stationery store because they had little gold covered ones, and they were very, I just loved them when I was really little, and I got into a lot of trouble, so I don't steal them anymore. But I've still, when I started going to art school, then I made myself commit to doing one a month for, you know, for the rest of my life. And sometimes I'll go through spurts and do extra ones, just as like if I'm away from home. Like I work in other mediums as well. Like I often transcribe what I work out in some of the notebooks into other books. Like I've got a lot of documentation of my practice, but also what I see when I go to galleries, or when I'm in other countries. I'm always noting, and I get people to write their names in them. So I've got like people's signatures and you know, just it's souvenirs. It's, you know, it's a little tacky sometimes, like it's just a memento, but to me it marks time, and I don't really have a very good memory, so I have to write things down, and I have to, that's the only way. And when I was going through these, I was going, wow, oh, I wrote that then, and then I wrote it again 10 years later. Like it's like it really is art's like a portrait of you, and I always say that it's always a self-portrait. No matter how you feel about it, you're always working with some set parts of yourself, and you're simply going back to them, and essentially you don't change. It's sad, but you just are the same person. You might become clearer with some essences of yourself, but I realized that, you know, that's me. And I was in Japan last year. I'd had a residency from the Australia Council, and I was in Tokyo for 3 months, and I have always been a Japanophile and very, very interested in everything Japanese. So it was a great honor to go there and see and smell and taste, and everything was sensational. And I'd recommend everyone go there because it's really a very important place on the planet. And I met some dancers who, quite minimalist dancers, and I happened to come across them in Tokyo one night. They were dancing in a graveyard, and we became very good friends, and I started collaborating with them, and they brought me around Tokyo to different performers and artists and dancers that they knew who were also very minimal, and which was something that I was sort of seeking in my life. And one night we went to see this man who I'd heard a lot about called the Hanging Man, and he hangs himself by the neck in his backyard every night as an action. Not to hurt himself, but as he does it as an action, as a performance where people are invited. And seeing this performance in the backyard, this action, really changed me. He did it, and he's a very humble, beautiful man, and he'd been doing it for 20 years. And afterwards we went for dinner in his house, and he explained his action. And I was very moved by the strength of it, by the pain of it. And when I got back to Australia, I was sitting in my backyard and looking at this peach tree that I'd planted 15 years ago that was growing all out of, it wasn't growing beautifully, it was like bumping into the clothesline. So I thought my action for as long as I could stand it would be to press up against the peach tree. I didn't want to hang from it, but using my whole weight was to press my body against it and try to motivate that tree to bend the other way just a little bit so that I could turn my clothesline and enjoy the tree. And in Japan, they have a very strong engagement with chaining nature, or changing it, sort of moving it, you know, the bonsai principles. And so I thought that that would be something that I could do as a reaction to all of the experiences that I had when I was there.